So part 2 of testing your charging system. Today we're going to test the regulator rectifier. In part 1 we made sure that our battery was fully charged and it was outputting the proper cold cranking amps to crank the bike in the first place. If you haven't had an opportunity to do that, I'll leave that link right here so you can go ahead and get started. In this video today, the first test that we're going to do is we're going to test the output from the battery to make sure that when the bike is cranked and revved to a certain RPM, it's getting enough signal from the charging system to properly charge it in the first place. If this checks out, then there's no other test needed. If it doesn't check out, then that's when we move on to step 2 and step 3 in this video. Your regulator rectifier has 2 jobs. One is to regulate the current going to the battery to make sure that it's getting enough to properly charge and that it's not being overcharged. The second job of the regulator rectifier is to rectify the voltage coming through it. The stator outputs AC voltage, the battery works off DC voltage. So the regulator rectifier's job in a whole is to receive that AC information, that AC voltage, rectify it, turn it into DC, and then the regulator regulates how much goes to the battery. So like this video, share this video, and if you'd like to see more in the future, consider subscribing. I post a weekly video for you guys, so please feel free to leave me any comments or suggestions down below. As I said, the very first test that we're going to do is we're going to turn the bike on. We're going to rev it to 5,000 RPMs. Per the manual for a Suzuki Savage or Suzuki S40 Boulevard, 5,000 RPMs, we should be seeing a reading from 14 to 15.5 volts. I would highly recommend you get a book for your bike. It will become invaluable in the future. You might not use it every day, but you're going to use it a whole lot more than you realize. Once we do this test, like I said, if this checks out, then there's no need to go any further. If it doesn't, then we'll go into the second test and the third test. Quickly on the multimeter, I've got my negative going to COM, and my positive is going to volts. We'll also be testing ohms, so you'll just leave this in the same spot. We're testing a 12-volt battery, so we need to go to 20 volts. Because 2 volts is too low, it wouldn't read 12-volt battery. We're going to 20 volts. So now that test's over and done with, I'm going to take off the seat so we can start to test the regulator rectifier. Now we're still testing volts. We're going to see how much power is actually getting to the regulator rectifier so that it can function properly. Here's your regulator rectifier. Here's your power. You got a red and a black wire. And for this, it's simple enough. We're just going red to negative on the battery. You want a reading from 12 to 12.5. So now we're going to check the ground. We know that the power is alright. We need to make sure that the ground is okay. So in that test, we're going to turn the multimeter from the 20 volts to ohms, the ohms reading. I'm going to go to black on the regulator rectifier, and then to the negative on the battery. We have no resistance. That means, well, not no resistance. It's not a no reading, but we have no resistance from one point to the next, which means that that ground is working properly all the way through the system. Now we're still taking an ohms reading. So here are the 2 connectors. This goes to the stator, and then this goes to the battery. I'm going to disconnect these 2, and then we're going to take some readings in between. We're going to probe the red wire with the red and touch all the yellow. Then the black to the red, and the red will touch all the yellow. And then we'll switch and do the same thing on the negative wire. So we're going to touch the red wire, not to the, make sure you're doing what goes to the regulator rectifier. Don't electrocute yourself and accidentally probe the wrong end. So these wires over here is what we're testing. We're testing the rectifier, the regulator rectifier. Red goes to red. Black, we're going to touch each of these. So you're going to see, as I touch all of these, I get no reading. What we want to see is that there's only a reading one way. If you get a reading both ways, or your reading is inconsistent, then that means there's an issue with the regulator rectifier and it needs to be replaced. And for all these, I'm getting no reading. That 1 point is essentially no reading, because it'll do that even. So now I'm going to take the black and put it to the red, and take the red and touch all these yellow prongs. And there I get a 0.28, 0.29, 0.27. So now we're going to the negative. We'll take the negative and put it, or the black and put it on the negative wire. Touch the red to all the yellow. Nothing. 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 Now we're going to take the red and put it in the black wire, the negative wire, and take the black and touch all the yellow. 0.27, 0.28, 0.27. Regulator rectifier is in good shape. So if you did the first test and you didn't get the 14 to 15.5, you moved on to the second test, which would be checking to make sure that the regulator rectifier is receiving voltage from the battery. The third test would be to make sure that the ohms reading is consistent between those three prongs and that it's only going one direction. If those are all checking out, but you're still not getting the proper charge, then the next thing that we're going to do in part 3 is test your stator itself. So keep an eye out for that video. Moto Mantha out. You guys stay safe. I'll see you next week.